Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from PettyRevenge. Story 1 is by SnooWoofers5703. A stupid petty revenge. So this happened many years ago before I met my husband. My age-appropriate friends of mine in our mid-20s used to occasionally go out. As usual, I was the designated driver. I am not a drinker. One of my friend's much older sister would occasionally go out. This older woman is crass, loud, and obnoxious, and just all around a swindler and grifter cougar. We'll call her B. But she wanted to always get invited, and we had no problem with it. One time I picked another friend of mine up, we'll call her Jess, because it made sense and I didn't want to have to circle back. We arrived at B's apartment and called her, and B walks over to the car. She wouldn't get in the car and stood by the front passenger door. She stood there looking inside the car with her hands folded across like a petulant child. My friend Jess rolled down her window and asked what's wrong. She muttered something with her usual obscene language and walked into her apartment and slammed the door. Jess and I looked at each other in bewilderment. Then my phone rang and B is screaming to tell Jess to sit in the back or else she's not coming with us. Because only lowly people sit in the back seat. I drove away and left her fuming. A month later, it was my birthday, and I rented a limo for a few friends to go to a restaurant. My phone rings, and it was B. She was again being rude and asked me why she wasn't invited and that she had never been in a limousine. I told her to calm down. It was because we didn't want her to sit in the back seat because she hated it. And I tried to be nice, but she was blabbering, so I hung up the phone. We were laughing like crazy. Best revenge of that moment. Don't want to sit in the back seat? Don't come. There's a lot of people out there that overestimate their value to other people. Our next story is by A's Wonder. Oh, we're going to be really busy this week? Too bad y'all couldn't accommodate me. My job was the shuttle driver for the airline crew, and I also had to load and unload their luggage. About 6 months into the job, my wrists started hurting from handling the loads of bricks that airline crews liked to pack. I ended up having to file for workers' comp claim, but there was no one else to handle the luggage, so I struggled along for a while. I asked to be moved to a front desk position, but was offered laundry, which would not have been much easier on my wrist. A couple of months of going to doctor's appointments and getting MRIs, I finally decided I had enough, and had a doctor write me a note stating that I needed a lighter duty. Yeah, I should have done that much earlier, but the boss, Beth, wasn't being helpful at all, and I knew it would be the end of my working there. In the meantime, a front desk position had opened up, which my boss promptly filled without asking me if I wanted it. I went into her office to ask about this apparent oversight and got some corporate speak in response. A bit of context. The hotel was right next to a major highway. I knew the back roads between the airport and the hotel, so traffic jams on the highway weren't a huge deal to me. When I went into the boss's office to have the above conversation, we were 2 days away from having the president visit the city. That meant that most traffic would come to a standstill, but airline crew still needed to get to their flights. After my boss gave me a thinly veiled, corporate-approved F off, I pulled the doctor's notes out of my pocket. I'm sorry, I can no longer perform the job of shuttle driver. You've offered me laundry, which won't work, and didn't want to work with me on a front desk position. Have fun in traffic on Thursday. The shocked Pikachu look on her face was priceless. She called another manager into the office to try to get me to stay. Laundry was mentioned again. Get it through your thick skull. Laundry will not help an overuse injury of my wrist. I simply pointed to the note and said, I can't do anything that will be hard on my wrist. I've asked more than once about front desk, which I'm more than capable of doing, but I guess it's just not an option now that Beth filled the position. I heard later from a coworker that Beth herself had to do the shuttle runs that day. I enjoyed my day on the couch and occasionally checked to see how screwed traffic was. Down in the comments by Imaginary Yak 6487. Nice. I had a major prick of a manager at a grocery store I worked at while in high school. I was one of many seniors graduating that year, but the only one that went to a different school. There were 3 high schools and mine was graduating first. He had put me on the schedule for the night of mine, but had me off with the others. I told him I was graduating the night before them. He called me a liar. I said no, I go to school A and they go to school B. He called me a GD liar this time, and even a couple of my coworkers told him I didn't go to their school and that I went to school A. He said that if I didn't come in, then I would be fired. Thing is, my stepdad was really good friends with Prick Manager's boss, who was the district manager. I was really pissed, and this is the only time I asked my stepdad to pull some strings for me. I was scheduled off and walked the stage. The Prick Manager got demoted to an assistant manager and moved to a different location. I saw him once after that, and me being a snot, flipped him off. Underneath that by Jacanopies, I had something similar when I was in high school and worked in an amusement park during the school year, so weekends only until summer. I lived in a different school district than everyone else in the section and had a different week off for spring break. Some people had scheduled off due to trips, but the manager hadn't asked about general availability and was less than pleased when I saw the schedule and said I wasn't missing a week of school. It sounds like for some reason these managers are trying to train their kids to hate their jobs and hate their managers. I know it's a lot of work to keep track of everybody's schedule and everybody's graduation and everybody's vacations, but as a manager, if you want to be decent, you kind of have to be aware of that. Our next story is by Metronome Zinthos. Move my stuff and yell at me for losing it, I'll make you doubt yourself. This happened 2 years ago and finally has an ending. I, now 17 female, have a father that is very strict about tidiness. He likes things to be placed in a very particular way. The thing is, I like to organize my room my own way. Our ways are very different. When I was 14, I kept the books and files on my desk in a very particular way. It was organized based on usage and importance, as I have ADHD and that's just the easiest way for me to find things. Because of this, to the average eye, it looks a little bit like a really tall pile of random stuff I just put there to avoid looking at it. To be fair, I had left it untouched for 4 months. But that's mostly because the pile consisted of stuff I needed for my summer and winter jobs, so I only used it during those times. That being said, my father didn't like that, so one day while I was at school, he moved parts of my piles he deemed himself as unimportant. Honestly, I didn't really notice for a while, then one day I decided I'd scan for the most important files from my job so that I won't lose them, only to find that the entire folder full of files had disappeared. Too many F's. That's quite the alliteration right there. Folder full of files. I looked around and even looked at my brother and mother's desk, but it had completely vanished. I asked my dad because he moved stuff a lot, but when I did, he started to yell at me. He said that I never knew how to keep my things properly, that I was lazy, careless, forgetful, unorganized, etc., and that I was delusional for thinking that someone else had moved it. He said that me having a job was a waste because I would never learn responsibility, because I couldn't even bother to be responsible over something important, something like that. He then ordered me to go look for it until I found it, or I'd get punished and yelled at more. Of course, I didn't find it. He held the fact that I had lost the folder over my head for the next 2 years and would yell at me occasionally about it when I misplaced something. Then, one day, when he tasked the entire family to help find his important document, I found a small box placed behind 4 large boxes in the storage area of my house. Peeking out of it was a sticker I had made for the lost folder. When I opened it, there it was in all its glory. Finally, I had proof that he moved it. Because it was in his storage behind his boxes filled with his stuff, I was both relieved and livid. He moved it. He called me delusional, crazy, irresponsible. He yelled at me about it for 2 years while I cried each time. After I showed him, he didn't even apologize. He said that I should have just kept it better, and if I did, then I wouldn't have lost it. Here's the petty revenge. Since that day about 1 year ago, I had started moving little bits and pieces of his stuff. Not to obscure places because it would be found out immediately, but a 1 to 2 meter radius between where he actually put it. Put down his cup of water and then left to take a phone call? It'll move from his desk to the random portable shelf thing he put some of his stuff on top of. Put down his phone to go to the toilet? One side of the desk to the other. His vape? From shelf to the pen holder he had on his desk. His shirts? Yes, he put them in order. I changed the order of shirts, which he had the same color. I'd switch the old shoes from the bottom of his shoe rack every once in a while. He doesn't use them, but he notices that something moved and tries to figure out what. Little things like that for an entire year. He would start yelling every time, claiming that he swore he knew that somebody took his stuff. But why would someone take his stuff only to put it a meter away? He stopped yelling about 5 months in and started commenting on how he was getting really old and starting to forget where he put stuff. But anyway, during this year where I hid his stuff, I was diagnosed with ADHD finally, and my dad started to learn stuff about ADHD and realized that my piling was actually really common. He also started to notice the patterns in which I put my stuff and commented less on it, even when I knew he wanted to. He actually went to a session with a therapist to ask more questions. Turns out most of the things he had issues with about me were all symptoms of my ADHD. Who would have known, right? Me, but it's chill now. It was also during this year that we realized that we were both mature enough to have a sit-down conversation about things like adults, or almost adults. We worked things out between us and promised not to drive each other crazy, on purpose. So after an entire year of moving his stuff, I confessed to him that he wasn't developing short-term memory loss, he just had a very petty daughter. He said he figured it out a month before I told him because he started to notice that when our relationship as father and daughter got better, his memory would get better too. Oh well, better luck next PettyRevenge, I guess. Honestly, I am very glad that you started to tell him that it was you that did it, because it's not fun for somebody who's getting older to start to question their mindfulness and if they forgot something, or, they could be developing dementia, they could be developing any sort of problems, their brain could be going bad. However, I would say with his behavior and the fact that he called you all these different names, it was deserved to have something happen. But it was also very, very good of you to tell him. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have a marvelous day.